For the longest time, I was trying to figure out how I would return to the Cake Radio Show and what topic I would talk about. There's a couple different topics that I like flirted with, but eventually I ended up seeing this movie, Companion, and the movie really sat with me, and I had a lot of thoughts, and I wanted to try talking about film on, the podcast one more time and just talk about my thoughts about this film because I really appreciated the intention and the um, things that were discussed in this film and also played up for laughs as well. Let's talk about it. Hello, you guys. Welcome back to CakeDive's Film Club on the Cake Radio Show. I hope y'all are doing well. It's been a minute. And today we're going to be talking about my review and thoughts on Companion, a new film that is out in theaters now. For those who used to watch my episodes in the past, I used to do a non-spoiler review and then do a spoiler review at the end. For the sake of time and the sake of what I wanted to talk about here in this podcast episode, I'm only going to be talking about the spoilers. There's going to be spoilers ahead, so if you have not seen the movie and you intend on seeing the movie, or you want to keep the secrets, if you want to keep it as like if you want to be surprised, which I recommend if you intend on seeing this movie, enter completely blind as you can, because you're going to enjoy it a lot more if you do. Please click off the video and come back once you're ready. Okay? Let's hop into it. So, I really enjoyed Companion. I think that, kicking off the year strong in terms of like movies like this, I think that, and when I say movies like this, I don't think the film, even though it's being pitched as a horror movie and like even the stars and stuff are pitching it as a horror movie, I don't feel like it's innately like a horror film. I feel like it's more of like a dark comedy, if anything. And I think it's just because of the fact that like a lot of the messaging, a lot of the themes and stuff that are talked about this movie. I also think like a lot of people don't know. Circling back, I think a lot of people don't know, what this film is going into things because the marketing has been very hush hush, which I think works in the film's favor. So there's some people who think this is going to be a pure horror film. There's some people who are going to think that this is like a social commentary thriller, and I think it's really like a blend of both, but they play it up for laughs here, in which is I think it's a pure like dark comedy. Um, I think that the film is very intentional in what it's talking about. I think that there's a lot of things, even if I'm reaching on some of the things I'm going to be talking about, I think that it's all like steeped in things that is very prevalent and relevant in the dating world and how people receive romance, how people receive, relationships in today's world. And I foresee like a lot of people being mixed on the film. Like people are either gonna really love it and really enjoy it, or people are gonna not get it and hate it. I don't see a middle ground with it. Um, but yes, let me just dig into like the different things that I really enjoyed this movie. I think the ways that I'm gonna split my conversation about this up is what I saw in the relationships between, each of the characters in this film and what I saw in them, how I think it applies to like dating in the modern world and stuff like that. And then any like miscellaneous thoughts that come up, while I'm talking about those things. Um, so for those who don't know what Companion is, and or like, well, at this point, spoiler warning again, either already seen the movie or you have, not seen the movie, don't care about the spoilers, and just diving in and just want to hear my thoughts on it. The film follows Sophie Thatcher as Iris, who is currently dating Josh, who's played by Jack Quaid, and they headed to this very big, luxurious mansion cabin in the woods for a weekend getaway with Josh's friends. And suddenly, there are several twists that happen that reveal that Iris is a robot, a companion, um, who was designed and also curated to meet and fulfill a lot of Jack's emotional and, you know, relation needs. Um, and they send her up, and they also like set her up to do something to another character in the film, played by Rupert Friend, who is Sergey, who is this very wealthy person who owns the cabin that they're staying in an attempt to take his money and stuff like that. And there's a lot of different twists and turns in the film that I really appreciated. But I think one of the things that I really appreciated in this film was how the different relationships were displayed across each of the characters and like the groups who were dating. And you had Kat and Sergey, you had um Patrick and Eli, and then also in a twist, Patrick and Josh, and then Josh and Iris, of course. And I wanted to talk about each of those relationships in the film. It based on the levels of like the different nuances and like things that I really want to talk about that I think from like the characters and relationships that I'm like, I believe I have an understanding on, but I'm not that fully confident on my thoughts. It's gonna take a little bit longer for me to really be certain on those to the ones in which I'm like fully certain of. And like I completely got it. I understood the assignment. And just dig into those in those ways. So for starters, I want to talk about Kat and Sergey's relationship in the film. The relationship, quote unquote, that they have is a very material relationship, and it is beneficial for Kat. And for Kat, once it no longer benefited her, she started changing in the ways that like she wanted to be, loved in this relationship. She decided to take out Sergey for like a better terms and to make sure I get some revenue on this episode. Um when we're introduced to like the characters and like the relationships that you know, the relationships that each character stuff is seen, we obviously see Iris and Josh's relationship first. We're introduced to them first, and we're introduced to this like we're obviously we open up with the um meet cute scene of them at the grocery store, which is supposed to be this really dreamy sequence and stuff like that, but it's revealed to be completely made up and something that was curated by Josh. When you know turning on Iris, and once he received Iris with Kat, it's a completely different story, and it's also because of the fact that Kat and Sergey are the only characters in the film that have a human to human relationship. Everybody else is dating robots. And I think the way that their relationship is approached is something that I think people might not talk about too much. Because the way that we're introduced to like their relationship is Kat is in the forefront, Sergey doesn't necessarily matter outside of money. And that's with intention because this is a materialistic relationship. When we're introduced to Kat, we hear of Kat first, and it's made you know apparent to Iris. Well, Iris believes that Kat doesn't like her, and it's made apparent to the audience that Kat, in fact, doesn't really like her. And later on in the film, there's a conversation between. Well, it's not later on; it's pretty early on in the film, within the first third. But there is a conversation between Kat and Iris at their dinner, and Iris straight up asks, like, why don't you like me? Like, what's going on? And Kat explains, like, oh, it's not that I don't like you, it's I don't like the idea of you. And again, she's being vague because the twist of Iris being a robot has not been revealed yet. Um, but Kat sees Iris. The reasons that Kat dislikes Iris, as well as like most of the robots in the film that she's interacting with, is because they are representing and providing a certain level of like love and even obsession that Kat does not receive from Sergey whatsoever. What Kat receives from Sergey is money and relations, not a relationship. And that is something that Kat hidden under that those material desires really wants, and is something that she is willing to do once she kind of takes this money from Sergey once Sergey is gone and leaves. And I think it was also done intentionally that like the reason I'm like kind of shaky on this is because like you're not really given a lot of information about Kat and Sergey's relationship, which again is done intentionally because you don't really see Kat and Sergey like be in love or interact too much. They're not really kissing or showing any major affection in the film. They're just kind of there together. It's kind of giving like almost like I Love Lucy vibes, dare I say. But even then, like Lucy and then the man that Lucy was dating in the show, like loved each other. It was like they're in the same space, but it's like they're separate. And obviously, Sergey gets removed from the plot, and you can tell that Kat doesn't inherently care about him going because of the fact that she wasn't really in it for him. She was in it for the money and what he was providing. And you could tell that like she was upset by Sergey going, but it's more so because of like the violence that occurred in order to get to that point, rather than like the loss of him. And even when she reveals that like oh like he's not a bad guy because Sergey kind of has this air of like something a scary air around him, like it's a given he's a gangster who's up to no good. When Kat reveals, as one of the twists, that Sergey is not a bad guy. He's just a very eccentric, Stalin loving Russian dude who is a sod farmer, and that's how he got his money. Yeah, she has no remorse. Like she does not care that she took this man's life with this plot. She only really cares about getting this money and leaving by any means necessary. Does not matter to her anymore. I think that is something that a lot of people, I feel like not like a lot of people, but like you kind of see publicly with some certain relationships, especially on like the YouTube side of things. You see a lot of like people, regardless of gender, talk about like how they like a lot of people don't necessarily inherently want like relationships, they want like financial security. And I think that a lot of people like do want the truth is like a lot of people do want like the emotional attachment, like the love of things. But people either also want to like be taken care of or like they selfishly are seeking out the material things, and when they do end up in a relationship that covers those material things, they realize that the love isn't there, or what they think is love isn't actually love. And that eats them up inside because they're questioning like oh like is this relationship beneficial for me, like does this work for me? And the answer really is no. um then you get to Patrick and Eli's relationship, and Patrick and Eli's relationship was really interesting to me because I feel like there's a lot of commentary in their dynamic that I feel like is I don't know if people are going to be able to discuss it, but I'm really excited to like be one of the first to like really talk about and discuss it here with this review. With Patrick and Eli, Patrick being played by Lucas Gage. No, wait, Patrick. Yeah, Patrick is played by Lucas Gage, and Eli is played by Harvey Golan. Um, Patrick and Eli are like the gay relationship that we have in the film, which I really appreciate that we have there. And I think that what's really interesting to me that like, this is something that I noticed early on in the film when when it was revealed that like, oh, they're dating. Um, and our first kind of like major introduction to like their dynamic, which we get a lot more of in the film. They're like the second most major relationship in the film, behind obviously Iris and Josh. The like when as they're talking about like how they met, quote unquote. Um, I immediately like noticed the stark difference between them. Um, Patrick is a slim, white dude who, for all intents and purposes, is conventionally attractive according to the beauty standard that society has established. And then Patrick, and in the end, this is no offense to either actor, um, but Patrick is a fat Latin man, and you know, the film I think engages in a little bit of like doesn't inherently, but it's just kind of the cards. Like he is like the fat character. Like he is there for the fat gay character, and like he's there. Eli is there for like comedic relief for the film for as much as he's in there before he's taken out the plot. Um, so you're seeing these two, and I was seeing those two, and I'm like, that you usually don't see that pairing often, and I think that was also intentional, and that's because of the fact that I feel like there is a there is a conversation that exists in which a lot of people talk about how in the gay community a lot of relationship, like a lot of people are seeking, a lot of gay people, especially gay men, are seeking out, the beauty standard, and the beauty standard doesn't necessarily differ across like, for straight men or for like for straight people or for gay people seemingly. Like people are looking for slim white, men or women. And with gay men, like they're specifically also seeking like the slim, thin, like twinkish white men or like the gym bodied white men. And even the minorities, the marginalized of the marginalized, since they are, you know, non black and they're gay, they are seemingly also seeking out the that body standard. And I think that there is a conversation about how like a lot of people do that for because like that has been what they've known because in media and stuff like that, they frequently see like white queer people date or fall in love with other white queer people, or if it's someone who is non-black, is someone who's non-black with, a white partner or a mixed partner. Um, and also just how like the community has also moved on like the wider populace of things like that has just been what's been pushed, and a lot of people have fallen into that, and also like I think people have fallen into it to the point which like they don't recognize that they've fallen into it. Um, like there, I think one of the most recent examples I saw of this was there was like a tweet. It used to be a TikTok, but it then became a tweet. It ended up on TikTok, in which there's this dark skinned black gay man who was ranting on TikTok talking about how he was kind of done with love. He was feeling upset that like he like the gay dating scene is not cute. Like the girls are not tapping into him like he was thinking they was going to. But as he keeps talking and talking and ranting about this, you it's revealed to us that like he is seeking white people, like white men out. And the white men are not feeling him because they're also feeling the white men are feeling the other white people. Like they aren't really interacting for like to black men like that. And some of them that are trying to fetishize him. And he's also in spaces that are not inherently designed for like black people to really find love like that in. Because again, white people are the beauty standard. They're actively seeking out. Like can't go to Grinder for that because the Grinder girls and gays are seeking out gym bodied um white men, like no fats, no femmes type vibe, like masculine white men. Like it's really the vibe over there. So it like again, obviously there's the think pieces and people talking about like, oh, like why are you in these spaces thinking that it's gonna work out like that? Or like why are you seeking out, attention from white people who, aren't gonna give that back to you? And the conversations about like dating interracially while being black and gay and those type of different types of things. I've talked about this before in the podcast. But this also transcends like race. Like this is something that like non black um minorities also face and have conversations about as well. And you've seen that as well. You've had the conversations about like why do um non-white people like seek out white people, and it's like there's conversations about like social the beauty standard, or it's trying to get closer to access to capital, since white people in society innately have access to capital, um and those different things. But I think it was really interesting seeing this dynamic, and then once it's revealed that Patrick is also a robot, also a companion, it clicked for me. I'm like, oh, he Patrick was seeking, this beauty standard out, was not having access, and also wasn't like also was struggling for relationships because frankly in the gay space, but also just in people in general, like people are struggling to date. There's a lot of people who are like fearful for some reason of commitment, and especially in the gay community, like, you see a lot of gay people complain, and like I've also ranted about it before, um, of queer people like not wanting to date or like the troubles with relationships in the queer space and all that it comes with that. Um, so I see it as like, oh, like Patrick, like Eli was someone who was struggling to find love in the gay space and was also chasing the beauty standard and built a boyfriend, built a companion, and selected a companion that met his needs. Um, and checked those boxes on that front. So I thought that was really interesting. And I don't know if people are going to be talking about that. If you agree with me, let me know your thoughts. If you disagree, also give me your thoughts. Don't be too mean about it now. Um, with that being said, like you could tell that Eli and Patrick, even though it was a robot to human relationship, you could tell that they still like loved each other and had that dynamic. Like even when Patrick reveals that like, oh, he knows he's a robot, you have that scene in which it's like you can like he discusses what love feels like to him, and how Eli, instead of like trying to reset him or punish him for like having that sentience, still loved him because of the fact that like he was getting the relationship and like the emotional attachment from somebody that he wasn't really getting before, at least from what I would assume. Um, and then Eli gets chopped, and that's the end of it, unfortunately. And you have Josh eventually weaponize, like reset Patrick, and um, use him for his own game, unfortunately, which I think is interesting because you can see how like men will weaponize other men and even women like to punish women or to like get what they want. And obviously leads me to like the conversation between Josh and Iris's relationship and their dynamic, which obviously is the forefront of the film and is the major portion of the film. With their relationship, I think I want to talk about Josh first because I think that the sinisterness of Josh is like the most one of the most interesting parts of the film. Um, Josh is, obviously he opened up and it's established that we're introduced to him as like this really sweet, charming, lovable oaf. Um, who like if it's a lot of the traits that like people would expect from a Jack Quaid character. Like Jack Quaid is like cutie patootie, no shade. And and the like a lot of people expect him to play like those lovable like Ophi characters and stuff like that. But as like the twists start coming out and like you see that he has more understanding, like you understand that he knows more than what we know and more than what he's letting on. You can start to see that he is like emotionally abusive, like he is when he's talking to his friends about this plan and stuff like that. Unless they know more than he does, like Kat, who really orchestrated a lot of this and teamed up with Josh to get that plan happening. Josh doesn't tell the other characters, anything beyond what he needs them to know. And then obviously when like Iris is not trying to be reset and is trying to or like set up for what happens and is obviously trying to run away, he is bouncing between things like trying to emotionally manipulate her, to like full blown violence. And there was one scene in the movie that I thought was really interesting. It's obviously like the Josh's monologue, the sort of like full unveiling of him as a villain. And there's like two monologues in the film. The first monologue is the one I'm talking about, in which and you saw it in the trailer, in which it is him and Iris at dinner. Iris is chained to the chair, and the candle moment. In that scene, Josh talks about how he talks about and rants about how like he's a nice guy and how he wants more for himself. He's tired of living in like a single bedroom apartment and how he has not found love yet. and wants Iris to seemingly be understanding of like the violence and the manipulation that he has put her through because he sees himself as so deserving of this. And I think that that was really interesting because I feel like oddly it was a really good way to like discuss how like men are moving nowadays. I think the reason I appreciated it was because of the fact that like you are shown Josh's like the ability to like commit violence and to be a horrible person, which allows you as a viewer to dispute the fact that he is not a nice guy. Um, and like also compare to and also kind of satirize the like how men are nowadays and how you see this like big movement of men kind of turning into like um people who are like you have like some of them seeking towards like the Andrew Tates of the world, the loser people who like do not have the fathers, who are looking for father figures who are manly, who are supportive, who are looking for, who want them to like lead and be the alpha, so to speak, and all that type of mess. You know, people who like feel that like they are deserving of more than what they currently are. And a lot of things that they are missing out on is either because of capitalism and the state of the world, which has like left them in this state of like loneliness and hopelessness, and just like how the state of, of society is today. And part of it is due to how masculinity and capitalism enforce a lot of these issues. Um, Oddly enough, when I saw that scene, it reminded me a lot of like "Don't Worry, Darling," but for completely different reasons than what you're thinking about when I just mentioned that movie. Don't get me wrong, "Don't Worry, Darling" was awful, and this movie is fairly good. Um, But the reason it reminded me of this is because of the fact that like I feel like both films had a moment in which they try to try seeing the like modern state of man oddly, but it's done very differently. And one works and one doesn't. Showing showing rather than telling strategy. And with um with Don't Worry Darling, the moment in which Harry Styles' character is like fully revealed to be like a villain and the big twist is revealed in which, you know, all the men's like were following the like an Andrew Tate like person because they were, not enjoying how life was going for them and essentially kidnapped, you know, these women and sent them into this like weird VR space, this idyllic like 1930s ish world of like victory. Um, Everything was told to us as a viewer rather than like inherently shown. Um, and even if like even the moment that was shown, which was like Harry Styles' character literally sitting hunched over at a computer, um, looking at like Andrew Tate adjacent like content, it was done horribly, and like people who saw the movie were already like abrasive to that because it was told to the viewer and like not really done and wasn't done much justice. Like they didn't really do too much with that, rather than use that as an explanation um, to make it like any use. And the men who are impacted by that stuff probably were not gonna see it. And when they did hear about it, they were automatically abrasive to it. Whereas with this moment, again, I think there's going to be a lot of men who probably fall into that the boat of Josh, who may end up seeing this movie because of the fact that they have no clue what this movie is going to be about. And if they do so happen to have a girlfriend, or they're interacting with someone who's like a girlfriend or some partner, they're trying to bag somebody. Their girlfriend or their partner might drag them over to see this movie. It might be gagged a little bit. The live might be gagged a little bit, and I think that again, Josh's actions are like shown to us, and there's that growing, like you kind of see Josh as this nice guy, but you get the inklings and the droppings that start to spill, showing that he really isn't a good guy. He's actually one of the like worst people in the movie, if not the worst person in the movie. Not even if not, like he is the worst person in the movie. Like that man deserved everything that he got. No shade. Um, but I think showing it and then having that big monologue at the end, and the second monologue very much like did things in a way that was like modern. It was partially played up for jokes, but obviously was laser focused in a way that was very honest and very like culture cutting, and also wasn't too like heavy handed in a way that will turn people off. Now, don't get me wrong, it's gonna turn men off regardless. Because I remember walking out that mystery movie screening, and I heard some older guy with their like, you know, their wife say that it was awful, and they were just like, oh, like I could have seen, like TikTok and stuff like that was saying stuff like that anyway. So there's always gonna be a demographic of people who like are gonna be turned off by this regardless, just because of the fact that like the message is gonna clock them. Like they just too stupid to listen. But there's gonna be that demographic that might listen and might be like, ooh, they may see themselves in a Josh, and that is that's not that's gonna be a rude awakening if it does work. Um, and then again, like Iris, you had a character like Iris who was very much in love with Josh. Obviously, it was programming, and obviously, there's a recurring joke that occurs in this, in which it's like, oh, it's just programming. And even though it was just programming, like what I liked about Iris's character is how everybody else kind of is like the straight man. Like everybody else is very much like kind quote unquote like normal in how they approach love and stuff like that. And then you have her in the corner being like, "Oh, I would do anything for you, Josh. Like I'll do anything. Like I'll cook and clean, and they'll be at your beck and call and stuff like that. Like I just love you so much." And like obviously, like most people aren't. Well, no. I was about to say like most people aren't that down bad, but oddly enough, there are a lot of people who are that down bad, especially when they see someone who they love. And I think it was just really nice seeing, you know, that as a contrast, and obviously see her grow into herself and grow a little bit of like humanity and being like, you know, sure I'm not human. She's like, sure I'm not human, but like I'm done with you. Even if I still had that soft spot for you, like I'm still gonna be independent and be like more of myself than what you were going to allow me to be, which I think was really nice to see. And everybody played their role nice. It was a fun film. I think y'all should watch it. That was my thoughts. Again, this was just my opinion. I wasn't digging into like too much data or anything specific like that. This was my thoughts of what I thought about the movie. I like the movie. I think y'all should go see it. It's in theaters now. Companion, y'all go ahead and see it. That was my thoughts on Companion. I hope y'all enjoyed this episode of CakeDive Film Club on the Cake Radio Show. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share the podcast to your friends, to your family, to what have maybe to your boss. If you think they funny, don't get fired because of me. But share it to your boss. Um, whether you watching this on YouTube where you get episodes before anyone else, thank y'all so much for tuning in. Or if you're listening to this on your favorite podcast platform, thank you so much for listening. Be sure to follow, turn on notifications, and give the show a rating because it helps. That's it for me. I'll see y'all soon. Bye bye.